The views and opinions expressed during Love and Life with Lana and Dave are those only of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of our podcast hosts or affiliates. Any content provided is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. All right, let's do it.
You're listening to Love and Life with Lana and Dave, the podcast where logic is power and you take control. Thank you for tuning in, making the choice to listen in and get ideas for your own love and life. Now, here are your hosts, Lana Williams and David Vaccaro. Here's the beginning of, well, first of all, I'm David Vaccaro.
And my name is Lana Williams.
Oh, and
you can't see, but Dave's giving me the finger guns.
I was.
And he's like, you're on.
Yeah, you go now.
I had to lean into it.
Right. And then she did it with her whole perfect radio voice and made me sound like an amateur. So Lana and I met, how many years ago was that? Was that 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
I believe, I think we actually, if you want to be like technical, which I always am, by the way. Right. We would start with me still living in Georgia.
Okay.
And I think we met and started talking through some weird group for Facebook dating from Massachusetts. Do you remember
It was, yeah.
I don't remember the name of it. It doesn't really matter because it didn't work.
I don't consider that meeting because I knew of you and of course,
but like that was the initial primordial ooze, of the relationship we now have.
Right.
That was the beginnings of stirrings of whatever.
So then you moved to Rhode Island, and I went to. I actually was going to meet somebody for a date, and I got stood up, which is very rare, by the way. I just would like to add that because it hurt my feelings. It actually did.
You heard your fifis.
It hurt my fifis. Yeah. So we. I posted something on Facebook and I said, is anybody in the Rhode Island area where I was and that wants to meet for coffee? Because I was there and I had driven like an hour away. And so Lana said, yeah, I'll meet you for coffee. And we went and met for coffee. Mm-hmm. And I bought her the coffee and it was almost a battle.
It was a battle.
It was.
You
did not want me to buy that coffee, but I was determined to buy it because I asked you to meet me for coffee or anybody, and that meant I would buy you a coffee.
Also, you're you, okay? I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
We'll get into a little bit of a sidebar and saying that Dave thought I was a really horrible, man-hating woman.
Oh, I am going to say that. So, and I will explain this.
I'm just admitting it. I'm saying that, I understand.
One thing, and it's one thing I love about you today, right, is she is very logical. Now, there's this thing where a lot of people believe that men are logical and women are emotional. And Lana is not. She's very logical, but it made her come across online as a man-hater. And she's totally not at all. I know her secrets.
I happen to find men very useful. I like men, and I happen to find them very amusing and entertaining and useful.
Yes, she does. So we actually sat for coffee, and I said, do you mind sitting outside because I'm a smoker and I wanted to smoke cigarettes? And she said, yeah, that's fine. So we sat outside. Then we ended up sitting and talking for 4 hours, sitting in the car and just talking. We can talk. Me and Lana can talk, and we talk about all kinds of subjects all the time. We do it once a week. And we started this thing where every Friday we even called it the podcast hour because we talk about specific things, and we're not going to get into what we talk about, but
I will say this: we started the podcast hour specifically calling it that because we at that point had decided we were going to create one at some point.
Yes, that's correct.
And so we at least needed to sort of take minutes and notes and stuff,
right? Yes,
about the process of it. So
right,
it usually ended up in a conversation about whatever, what have God knows what all.
Right. And we would have these conversations. I mean, and so we both decided that, our conversations are very logical, where we always talk about some kind of topic we found on the internet where somebody's brokenhearted because somebody broke up with them or whatever. And we pick that apart and we analyze it and we have a conversation about it. And those are what our conversations are as friends. And then we decided we should make a damn podcast about this stuff because
I think weren't we told though by several people?
Oh, man.
Because we did a couple of live videos.
Yes.
And we have both friends on both sides that are just like, why don't you guys do a podcast? Like,
yeah, you guys should
really do that. Because I think we bounced off each other a couple times.
Right. And so here we are. Yeah.
So we decided, you know what? Let's put the money behind it and do it.
That's right. So yeah, we purchased some equipment and here we are. And this is actually was going to be a test thing, and we may actually release this. Who knows what's going to happen with this? It's
right. You never know.
You never know.
Well, I will keep it professional just in case.
Nothing is professional.
Excuse me, that's not true.
I would like it not to be professional.
Well, I'm keeping it professional in the sense that, like, I'm going to remain diplomatic and pleasant.
Aren't we always like that anyways, though?
We're not dropping names, and we're not.
Correct. Yes.
We're not dragging anybody through the mud and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
If we do discuss something, it will be completely and totally anonymous. Anonymous.
Right. Anonymous. Anonymity.
So yeah, we spoke for 4 hours that day, and then I don't remember. I think we just we ended up friends, but like we had several conversations like after that for a couple of years where we just would be on the phone for like 8 hours.
Right. And we literally had 8-hour conversations. Yes. We had 8-hour conversations, which is insane. And,
sun's coming up. I have things to, I can't believe why are we still, I don't know. We would just get into extreme pontification.
Well, that's the thing is when we get involved in a conversation, and we both necessarily, and just so everybody knows, there are times where we disagree on a topic, but we can handle. We're the type of friends and the type of conversationalists that can actually have a conversation and debate something without us getting mad at each other for being different, right? And we appreciate that because we both love to learn, right? And I think that's fair to say, right?
It's
that
fair.
we both love to learn. Like
I like to learn to an annoying degree. So
right, yeah, me too. So I think our conversations turned out to be a great thing. So we figured we'd share them with you, and that's how we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
breaking it. It's called breaking it down.
That's right. And you may hear a couple things in the podcast, and so if you don't watch this first podcast, you're not going to know. But this noise, that is me opening my Zippo to light a cigarette.
Well, they won't be able to watch it, Dave, so I don't think they can see anything.
But they can hear it. Now they know at least what it is. They hear that clank and they'll be like, when we're listening to,
and when you hear this, that means I'm drinking coffee.
That's right. So,
which I love to do.
So So when you're listening to Life and Love with Lana and Dave, and you hear that means I'm about to light a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and when you hear the clanking of the cup, and and if I'm talking and you hear me and I sound like this, that means I'm just taking a sip of my coffee.
I might be talking into my cup.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like when we talk into the cup. So we're just giving you kind of heads up of things that you may hear, and now you'll know what they are. You can feel special because you listened to the first podcast. And
should we stop here with this, or should we go on to who we are as people?
Yeah, we can we can talk about who we are as people, what we do, or as much as you want to give up. I'll let you go.
Well, I don't know that. Obviously, what we do as professions,
right?
I guess it's important. I don't know if that's what.
I guess it would be. Yeah.
But what we chose in life, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't make. I guess it makes sense to people I know, but nothing ever makes sense to me that I do. And if you knew how my brain worked, it would make sense. And that's just because I'm constantly seeking. I'm only as good as the last 5 minutes of my life. I have this little coach in my head that tells me, hey, it's been 5 minutes. What are you doing? You're slacking, whatever. So who we are as far as what we do, it kind of matters because I guess it is part of like our personalities.
I agree.
But then what about I was just saying, do you want to get into our childhoods? Not really in deep, but just like how we became the people that we are.
We can do that. And I think now that we're talking about it and we're going to let this run, I think that it would be, if anybody heard that and then we said, nah, let's not do that, they'd be like, damn, I wanted to hear that. Right. So let's have at it.
What is it called? That leaves them wanting more.
It sure does. And maybe we will actually do a separate podcast talking about our childhoods growing up and what it's made us into, because I think that may be a long podcast, to be honest.
I think it would be. I mean, we can skim it.
Especially with our lives. I don't know if it's skimmable. I don't think either one of us.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about now, obviously.
I don't think, right. And I don't think either one of us are capable of skimming anything.
Well, we're going to learn today.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Let's go for it.
I mean, let's learn.
Okay.
We're capable of adjustment.
You go first so I can follow your lead, because I'm going to have a difficult time skimming. And good luck to you. Go.
Here's my skim. I mean, I'm technically in my early to mid 50s. I'm probably one of those women who doesn't care if people know my age. So it's just going to be weird to discuss my mid 50s now as like a topic. Excuse me. But I don't know. I'm a resident of Rhode Island, been here my whole life, moved out of Rhode Island a couple of years, came back, very small family. A lot of my family's out of state or has passed on. At my age, that's not really unusual. I was raised by a single mother. I happen to be of more than one. I'm a bicultural, multicultural, not necessarily one culture. And I've just been a logical kid my whole life. I would be called a nerd years ago. I mean, things have changed. And there are people that will say that the words that we're using now are going to be taken a little bit differently. But when I was a kid, I would be called a tomboy or... So I was the kid that was, I had the bikes. I was out riding bikes and jerk digging in dirt. And, I grew up with a couple of cousins who were around my age who were just a couple of boys who were into Lincoln Logs and erector sets and, that kind of stuff. So I kind of had that side of me as a kid. I try to be very objective. And there are days that I have to struggle with that as far as just what I've been taught as a kid. But for the most part, I'm just the type of person who will like to break things down, find out why they are what they are. That's just the way my childhood has always been. Everybody that I've been related to has driven them insane. I think at 4 or 5 or 6, somewhere around there, my family learned to give me a library card and books and just get out of my way because they couldn't answer my questions. I had just too many questions about everything. Wasn't extremely religious. And then as I got older, I don't know. I worked a bunch of office jobs and things like that, but I have been a DJ for 37 years at this point. So I started that, something I've done my whole life, started somewhere around 16 or 17 and have still do it, for pleasure. If it becomes too much of a job, I don't like it. And I'm in the computer business at this point. That's somewhere around 13 years in. That I went to school, got a bachelor's degree in network and engineering and kind of in business tech support at this point. So that's it. I did spend 10 years in radio, so I perfected my radio voice as much as I could. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. I don't know. Is that a good skim?
That's a pretty good skim, and I'm impressed, and I don't know how the hell I'm going to skim. So now it's my turn.
Gonna have to bring it.
And so you'll learn more about Lana too as we go. So as far as myself, I was raised with a single mom who was a model. So confidence has always been instilled in me. My father was also a musician. So growing up, I'm not going to say about my life. We'll talk more about that stuff later. I had kind of a tough childhood. I was not raised in a bad neighborhood or anything like that, but I definitely struggled with childhood growing up. So I was spoiled rotten. I was an only child, number one. I had grandparents, so I was an only grandchild as well. Growing up, I come from my family's Italian, so my family's from Italy, Naples. I was born here, so are my parents. And but growing up, I was like I said, spoiled. So I was taught that things are what define people. That's what was instilled in me. So as I grew older, and it took me many years to realize that's not the case, but as I grew older, I kind of followed in my father's footsteps, not really on purpose, because it's just what happened. I became a musician. I've been a musician since I was 9. I started playing guitar, and I still to this day release music. I record, and I release stuff. I've done it professionally as well. And I always was trying to kind of spoil myself, because I thought I needed all this stuff to make me happy. I learned otherwise today, that that's not the case. I live very simply, and people that know me know I travel full time in an RV. I'm actually sitting in an RV as we speak, and I'm parked at a campground somewhere in Massachusetts, which I absolutely love. My neighbors are always happy because they're camping. So I live simply today, even though I ended up in the tech industry, and I was always striving for success, which I've received, and I've become very successful in the tech industry. And I went through a process where I was in a band professionally, loved it, learned a lot from that. And then the tech industry, again, is something that I love too. To me, it's not a job. I buy and sell tech companies. That's what I do for a living now. So I look at things very literal as well. And I think that's why you and I get along so well, Lana, because we both are very literal people. It's like to me, there are no excuses for anything. You can't give me an excuse why you do things the way you do them. You should be doing things that are best for you, period. Instead of, well, I do it like this because of that. Because the both of us came from I think fair to say, rough childhoods growing up. We had some struggles. And I think we learned and became very logical. And that's why we analyze things today and go, should they be like this? You know, there's, and we know how we are about that. When somebody says, oh, you should, there's no should.
I know the word should is really tough.
It is.
And it's not like I try very hard not to use it. It's not easy.
No, right. Right.
I will say that though, like what people, what people do, they do. But my interest in people doing what they do is that they know why they do what they do. And a lot of people don't actually have any idea why they're doing things that they're doing. And I find that extremely interesting.
Right. So I think you'll find the more our podcast goes on, you'll find that Lana and I both analyze our own lives all the time to grow. If I'm not growing, I'm dying. And that's not something I made up. That's a quote that I happen to love. If you're not growing, you're dying. Right. So, like look at anything, a plant, a tree, it's growing or it's dying. If it's not growing, it's dying. And I believe that to be a huge part of my life. If I'm not growing and learning every day, then what am I doing? I'm not one for the mundane. I'm not one for the repetitive motion. I mean, there's
a place in life for the repetitive motion.
There is.
Get me wrong about it. It just
of course
isn't appealing to the two of us.
Correct.
I do believe that for me, to take things apart in my brain and figure out what makes them do what they do, including language and just culture and all that kind of stuff it's big for me. Anybody who knows me really well is beyond annoyed with that.
Well, they are going to get to know you very well because that's the whole point of the podcast. And as we continue on, they're going to start realizing who we are as individuals and why we're so analytical. And the nice thing about our podcast, you'll find that we do analyze things to the point of, like, I'm single. I've been single for a lot of years, and I'm happily single. That's key, right? I'm happily single.
Yeah.
Do I feel lonely on occasion? Of course, but I'm not alone. And when, people are like, I don't want to be alone for the rest of my life. I'm like, don't you have friends and family and stuff like that? And
well, the word alone is, I don't know.
Analyze it, right? We do. We analyze it, and being alone is when you're alone. And I like my alone time too. And God knows, yeah. So, well, that's basically who I am. How was my skim? Was my skim okay?
I think your skim was okay.
Oh, good.
I didn't time it.
Well,
I think it might have even been shorter than my skin, which.
Well,
I left some stuff out, but I know I'm going to have plenty of time to fill it in.
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, there's a whole, there'll be questions.
I'm also happily single. And not hip. And I won't say happily single. I will say content. In my person, content I can sit in a room and enjoy solitude. I really enjoy solitude.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't. Some people really can't because that's the way they're wired. Some people were taught they weren't supposed to. That's a whole nother thing. But enjoying solitude is from the beginning, right? That's your baseline. And then from there, everything else is...
Right. Everything else is icing on the cake, which is...
Right.
And we will definitely have a podcast about this because I think a lot of people rely on a relationship to make them happy. And that's not really, to me, that doesn't even make sense. And we'll talk about that stuff later on.
So that's why we say life and love, because we feel that we have people around us that are all types of different relationships around us that encompass us as a person. I'm one of those people that believe, and again, all my beliefs are not necessarily things that everybody should believe, but I do believe that you have to have different types of relationships around you in order to become like a robust person in life.
I agree.
No one relationship should define you. No one relationship should entertain you perpetually. There should be levels of community around you.
Well, you hear it all the time, and we're not going to get into the whole relationship right now, but you hear it all the time where, people say you have to be happy with yourself before you can be happy with somebody else. And that's factual. And you'll find that Lana and I both know a lot about how the brain works. I actually have some training in psychological forensics, which means I know the way the brain works scientifically, not medically. I'm not talking about, I'm not a psychologist, but I get the way the brain works completely. And from a scientific standpoint, and there's a lot of misconception, and you'll find a lot of our processes during these stories that we'll be talking about, and these topics will be very based on psychological events that happen in people's brains and the way that they think. And we're not going to be talking about this is my opinion. I'm going to be myself. I will be talking about the way our brain physically works and what happens scientifically to your brain. Because people are like, well, everybody's different. Yes, your thought processes are different. However, the brain all works the same. Everybody's brain works the same. The way you complete your thought processes is your own. And we'll talk further about that stuff later. I don't want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to skim. We're skimming.
We're skimming.
So what else in the introductory podcast do we need to include? Did we catch everything?
So I think we may have, and I think that this could be something that people can look at and kind of get a base idea of what is going to be next. Let's talk a little bit about some of our subjects. You've got notes.
So, hi, I'm Lana. I'm like a noteaholic.
And I'm David.
My brain is crazy.
I can't stand taking notes.
Yeah, my brain is crazy. I learned at a young age, even if it doesn't make sense to me, that the quicker I get it out of my brain and on some paper or something, just the more peaceful I am. Otherwise, I'll run things through my head and drive myself crazy. So if I may take my notes for an hour and a half and then throw them in the trash. Won't make any difference to me, but that's how I organize things as they come through my head. And I get very worried about forgetting that I'm going to keep track of something. So some of the subjects that I have here, I guess we'll go with what I have, because I don't think your notes, Dave, are going to be, well, you might have some notes, but you might be able to bounce off what
I would bounce off what you've got, because, my notes are,
these are notes that we take, or I take these notes. Once I knew that we might do a podcast at some point, I started taking notes of like general topics
about conversations
and things like that, just because it doesn't, to me, I'm an efficient person, and to me, it doesn't make sense to go back and try to remember all this later. So I'll take a piece of paper and a pen and just sort of write down words. So some of my words are related to underlying issues in yourself and in your relationships. Things like attachment, things like the honeymoon period of a relationship. I think our little sample is about that. which sounded much worse than this one. This one sounds fantastic. But anyway, moving on. You as a person and your character, you as an accountable person, how to practice absolution. Were you looking for advice or validation? That's a big one.
Yeah, it is.
And it's actually not a problem. Neither one of those are a bad thing, but sometimes it's very hard to determine between the two. Something I call begin as you mean to go on, which I think is a very good process if you apply it correctly. Things like dating profiles, that's kind of a frivolous thing if we're ever on dating sites, like what kind of profiles we like, we don't like, what we think is a good idea, what just that would be like a lighter topic.
And that would probably lead us to the topic that I love so much, is being honest with yourself.
Well, right.
So if I'm looking at a dating profile, which I'm not very often, but if I see one and they say, it's definitely a no-go if you voted for Trump, I'm saying, okay, I'm out. Fine. I'm being honest with myself, right? That's never going to work, because if they're that deep with it, it's not going to work. And again, another thing about being honest with yourself is, if they say, I won't date a smoker. Well, I'm a smoker. So I don't care how attractive I find that person in the picture, or their profile is perfect. I'm not their guy. And
so you're going where I'm going.
Exactly. That's where the honesty comes with yourself.
I may or may not have criteria or preferences, and there are people that may or may not appreciate my preferences or criteria.
Correct.
And that it's kind of not necessarily something that matters. It's more about, is this just a match that is going to be good for you? So I always say I tend to be a brunette most of the time, with the exception of all the gray hair coming in. But if I meet somebody, or if I see in a profile somebody that eliminates brunettes as an option,
right,
I'm not going to then chase that person down and try to make them consider brunettes if they don't want them. I'm going to say, oh, right. Okay, that eliminates me. I'm not going to get upset about it. I'm not going to have I'm not going to rant about it.
And we know, and part of our,
they're wrong.
When we touch that podcast, we will go over this at a further point. But we don't want to get too much into what this is. But yeah, there are a lot of people that will not accept. I don't want somebody that does this for a living. And then they got to come on and go, well, I'm the perfect guy. And I do that for a living, or I am a brunette, but brunettes are just as good as blondes. And well, if you don't like it, you don't like it. I mean, that's, you can't expect somebody to change, and
it all comes down to me, it all comes down to the root of all of it most of the time when it comes to dating is, how content you are. I guess that starts with the contentment with yourself, your contentment as a human being, as a whole human being on your own.
Right.
And then how much you think you have to be part of a couple, and how much that defines you as a person.
Right.
And if it defines you as a person to be a part of a couple and you're not, then you're always going to be out there trying to search for something to pair off. It's going to be a perpetual thing. And therefore, you're going to get aggravated at anything that stands in the way of that. And when somebody tells you that your criteria is wrong, you're gonna get furious, because that's going to get in the way of you closing a deal or whatever it is that you're trying to do. If you're happy with yourself, then you don't want somebody that, to me, mutual interest, and this is friendships and everything. To me, mutual interest, it should be a requirement. It just should be a requirement of somebody that you're vetting as a perspective to say, I refuse to deal with anybody that is not mutually interested in me in whatever form of relationship this is. So if I'm talking to somebody who doesn't have interest in me as a person, that should be a criteria that I follow. And I say, well, I have to eliminate somebody that is not mutually interested. That will eliminate a lot of that stuff where somebody says, well, this person would be perfect except they don't like something about me. That makes them not mutually interested. So therefore they should just be eliminated based on that. And so that's how I feel about, that's just the way I go about it, to say, well, mutual interest is a mutual effort to me is just part of a criteria package that I won't deal with somebody that doesn't have the same effort back in return, it doesn't make sense to do that. It doesn't matter
Right.
who they are.
Of course. And that will be one of our podcasts for sure, because there's a lot to say about that, as you can tell.
That'll
right?
be more than one podcast.
Yeah.
Well, this hopefully will go on for a long time. Let me throw another couple topics in here real quick.
Okay.
Contingencies and preventable things. Realistic and responsible dating. That kind of goes along with being honest with yourself. Popularity. Is it popularity that I wrote here? Being genuine. Vanity and popularity, being genuine versus trying. How to explain let me see. How to be proactive in interactions and how they may turn out. I guess what you're looking for in know your room, I guess, or know how to read your room. Comfort, stability, monotony. I wrote that specifically because we sometimes equate comfort and stability with just like a rut and a schedule, a routine, something that it can be that, it can become that, and we can kind of confuse the two. Your mentality is a business partner, your business partner mentality, and that's in relationships or out. Friends, your romance, your rank of romance with friendship, and how some people think that romance is a higher rank than friendship for some reason.
Right.
Fear of being alone, fear of what people will think of you, assuming things of other people. That's one side of my list.
Yeah, that's going to be.
But that's enough.
So, yeah, and so I'm going to give a title to one that I definitely want to put a title on, and you know how I feel about it in my analogies. There will be one called "If you try to make a tomato plant an orange tree, you will kill it." So there are, and briefly touching on it, there are people that just will not accept the fact that a relationship is never going to be a beautiful orange tree. But you created this beautiful tomato plant, which is a wonderful friendship. But people tried to turn it to an orange tree, and they kill the tomato plant, and then they have no friends. That's why they're not friends with that person anymore. That's why you look at a lot of people and you ask them about their ex, and they hate them. They have nothing good. It once was a person you loved. So did you destroy a relationship just to try to make it something it's not? And that's going to be, I think, a really popular topic, because I think people do it all the time. And
can you pivot? Can you pivot?
Right. Well, you should be able to pivot.
Your energy, and can you refine it? Can you reroute your energy?
Right.
Some people cannot. I mean, I don't think that's true. I actually think most people can, but some people will not.
They just will not, because they want what they want. And they're not being honest with themselves. You know, I've ended relationships because I thought we have such a great friendship, but this is not a great relationship, like a romantic monogamous relationship. It's not the best. So it's not what I'm looking for. It's not what you're looking for. But yet we have this great friendship. Let's just keep it here and make that change. And then, I mean, the last girl I dated for a year. It was not the right situation. But we had a great tomato plant, and I said, let's just keep it a tomato plant. And I talk to her every day still. We're great friends. Right. We just weren't heading in the right direction relationship-wise. And eventually... Would
you consider it to be an enlightened state of mind to be able to...
I think so.
Transcend?
I think so. And I think...
And say, okay, this is not the way I pictured it when it started, but it doesn't mean it has to be...
Correct.
A horrible thing.
Yeah, it wasn't a horrible thing. I mean, is a breakup tough? Of course it is. I mean, I loved her and I wanted it to work, but it wasn't. So the thing is that if I keep pushing it and pushing it, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to despise her for not being who I needed her to be in a relationship, or she's going to despise me.
She was, right?
Correct.
Who she was, yeah.
Correct. And you learn that about somebody over a period of time. It's not something that you blows my mind. And we'll talk about this in a subject too, where people get involved in a relationship and they go on 2 dates with the person. They're like, oh, I'm in a relationship now. It's like, what? You don't even know that person. I mean, you know the story because we've talked, and all these stories we're going to talk about, the two of us have already discussed at some point in our lives with each other, because like I said, we said earlier, we've had major conversations, 8-hour conversations. So of course we talked about all this. I was actually dating somebody for a short period of time, And all she would talk about is where we're going in this relationship. Like, do I see long term? And I go, we're just two grown ass adults that are attracted to each other and we're hanging out and seeing where it goes. What is wrong with that? Let it grow organically. And that's another thing that I will speak.
Yes. Well, that's the timeline.
Organic.
It's the timeline.
Correct. Timeline matters. I mean, everybody's timeline is different, but you can't tell me that you're totally in love with somebody. You might love that person, but are they the right person for you in a matter of 2 months? Because you don't really even know that person in 2 months. You don't.
Well, I think it's so. There's such a process or in this culture. Well, I don't know if it's this culture where we're at now, because today it might be different. But over the years, I've just seen people. It's just a matter of they're trying to close the deal. I want to just get involved and figure out later whether this person's right for me or not. And it's just such a backwards way to go about it. But it happens a lot.
We wouldn't do that buying a car, right? We don't go and say, oh, I like the color of that car. It looks good to me. I'm buying it. And then I'll figure the stuff out later. Then we'll find out if it runs later after I pay for it. No, you would never do that. So why would you do that in something serious as life? That just doesn't make sense to me. So, and you'll find that our podcasts are very much this way.
Yeah. This conversation we're having right now is like, of course, going to the left. And that's forward to the right, or it's taking a turn. And it's fine. That's how it goes.
And this is supposed to be an introductory. And you're going to find out that our conversations do go all over the place a little bit, but we try to stay a little bit focused. And so I think our introduction, not video, our podcast, our introduction podcast is basically this. This is what you're going to get. We'll try to be a little more stable throughout our podcasts.
We'll try to keep it streamlined.
Yeah, we will try, and there's no promises. But hopefully you'll enjoy the ride with us and enjoy some of our conversations. But again,
let's check our time, Dave. Where are we at?
David. I don't know. There's no timer on this. I was just looking at that, and I'm like, I don't see a timer on here. This is a problem. I'm going to have to look for that.
That's not good. Well,
there should be some sort of timer on here.
I'm going to check my side.
Yeah. Well, I should have it on my side because I created it, right?
Right.
So, okay. Anyway, I think it's long enough. I'm David, and she's Lana, and we are, the name of our podcast is Life and Love with Lana and Dave. And hopefully you guys will check us out. And
we'll see you soon. We'll talk to you soon.
We will talk to you soon. And eventually we'll get to the point where we're doing these live, so you can watch them live and then, have your friends listen back later. But you guys have a spectacular day. And
yes.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Be good to one another. It's pretty simple. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, you just listened to Love and Life with Lana and Dave. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the podcast, leave us a comment or review, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. We'll see you soon.